This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Welcome to the Living It Out podcast. My name is Kelly Pagel, and with me today is Chris Bainey, Findlay campus pastor. Welcome.
Thanks, Kelly. It's always a joy to be here on the Living It Out podcast.
And it's always a joy to have you. It's great you're back with us, and I know our listeners are probably looking forward to that too. We are wrapping up the final week of our Vault series, The Vault.
Yes.
And it's been a great series.
It really has. Actually, the phrase that I've heard over and over again is, man, this has been a challenging series, and a challenging series in a good way that gets people thinking a little bit differently. And so in that regard, I think it's been fantastic to create good conversation and good thought around it.
That's great. That's wonderful feedback,
yeah,
too.
It really is.
There's can sometimes be, with the topic of finances and stuff, that can be a little bit of tension
Absolutely.
there.
That's the series where I'm gone. I'm checking out.
That's a I'm good series.
That's right. Exactly. Back a little throwback there. I like it. That's good.
Yeah, but that's great. That's great feedback that people were receptive and saw it as a good challenge of hey, what can I learn and how can I take a step in this area? So excellent. That is fantastic. Well, as you may know or may not, it was a special weekend too because we had our campus pastors speaking at each of their respective campuses.
Oh, it's always a joy to be able to do this as a campus pastor. You kind of have your hometown crowd and the opportunity to stand in front of them and preach God's word. So very grateful to Ben for that opportunity that he granted to us. And so if you go back and rewatch the message, I believe you'll see Luke Shortridge, our Perrysburg campus pastor, who did an excellent job. But it was really fun speaking locally to your local campus, and they're just fun to hang out with. These are the people that we get to do life with.
That's
so it's
right.
Great.
That's right. What a treat. And as we dive into this, I want to open with a question because it was all about. There was a lot of conversation around choices in this particular message. And so, when you make choices, are you one of those pro-con list type of people?
Yeah, this is such a great question, and I feel like I always start this way with your opening questions. I wish my wife was here to answer it because you would get the real answer. I'm definitely a strategic thinker. Okay. I am maybe to a fault. I'm processing through outcomes and weighing the cost-benefit, specifically of my time. That's my most valuable resource. So I really think I am. Now, where I'm unique is that I don't need to make the list. I verbally process it all to my wife's chagrin because I'm verbally processing it all. I'm working through it, so I'm a verbal processor. I'm not a list-making processor. I probably should do that more often. So if you're in conversation with me around a strategic thought, I'm probably just rambling a little bit and then, that makes sense. Now I know the answer. So that is my process, and it's definitely strategic, pros and cons, but it's very verbal.
Gotcha. What a great observation about yourself. I mean, to know that that's how you roll, that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of friends who are not verbal processors, and I have to change my strategy when I'm speaking with them, but I'm always fascinated by the way that they journal or they make lists or they do different things. I need more of that in my life too.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's great to look at other people and say, okay, now how are they doing that, and how can I draw from that?
And I've met those people too, and maybe you're one of them, listener, that are like fly by the seat of your pants, and sometimes I envy that. I want that a little bit more. But I'll just give this quick aside. It's kind of a fun story. So I have a strategy for vacationing called pre-strategic planning for spontaneity. So here's what I do. I research like crazy. I come up with a list of things that are just for me so that when my wife looks at me on vacation and she says, what do you want to do? I go, well, we could do this, and we're kind of making the plan up on the fly. So this is an example of how my brain works, like pre-planning that then leads to adventure. So you have the flexibility to pick and choose. You're not so rigid, but you've thought through it. So that's my encouragement for listeners is maybe a little pre-planning leads to that spontaneity.
That's great. And it all ties in. That
really
whole pre-planning really all ties in. So thank you for sharing that little bonus for the listeners there. before we
fun
dive.
quirky fact about me.
That's right. That's right. Well, we will jump into our scripture here. We've been hanging out in Matthew 25 for the past couple of weeks, and this week wrapped it up with the final parable. It's a grouping of 3. And so before we go too much further, it would be great if you could just give a little synopsis to our listeners.
So Matthew chapter 25 there's a consistent through line in 3 different parables. Jesus is sharing these on purpose, and each one is building on one another. But the through line is that Jesus will return. He's making it very clear that he will return. He's the master. He's the king, and he will return. So we have to think today what we can do today as if we're preparing for the day of his return. And so through this, we've really been identifying in the series what really is the fulfilling life. Well, Jesus lays it out in multiple parallels. This weekend, we really focused in on what's going to happen when he returns, and he talks about how separation is going to occur. You're going to have the sheep and the goats. And so for listeners who have read through the text, listen to this weekend's message, you know the difference between the sheep and the goats. Essentially what he's pointing out is that the beliefs that we have about Jesus will divide us into 2 groups at the end of our lives. So we have to pay attention to our beliefs. But also, and this is what's so amazing about Jesus, is he says, believing in me leads to a certain lifestyle. And he points out the characteristics of the people and how they live each day as they choose to believe Jesus. They'll follow Jesus. They are living in a certain way. So he points out this idea of when you were hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. You clothed me. You invited me in. You cared for me when I was sick. And it's really pointing to this idea that every day we can do acts of mercy and compassion, and everyone can do them. And so it's an invitation to live a certain way that follows our belief in Jesus. So that's really what we're looking at in the parable. That's what we unpack this weekend. And we really want people to think critically about what a fulfilling life of following Jesus looks like.
Yeah. It made me think about the pre-planning even that you said, like really thinking about how are we living out what we profess if we say we believe in Jesus.
Yeah,
So,
and that planning prepares you for those interactions that come up throughout your day. You've thought through it. You've prepared your heart for it. And we can get into that a little bit today.
Yeah, I'd love to. That sounds great. So our bottom line was our actions reveal what we believe about God, which is kind of what you were getting into there.
Yeah, and it's such an important understanding here, and because my fear, and I even voiced this to the Findlay campus this weekend, was 2 things. Number 1, somebody would really take this as you can just do really good things in life and Jesus will put you on the right side of him. You know, when he separates, it's like the things that you do, the good, if we do more good than bad, then we're going to make it to heaven. And although Jesus is pointing to the activities that are good from good people that follow him, we know also that Jesus was very clear. There's only one way to heaven, and it's through the Son. It's through accepting Jesus Christ. So what I really want our listeners to not get caught up on is that Jesus isn't just looking at the activity that you do and saying, oh, they did more good than bad. No. It's because of your belief in Jesus Christ that your actions follow. I'll give a funny example that the Findlay campus got to hear. You get to hear it again for the rest of the campuses. It's new. I've been a Browns fan my entire life. Every year I believe that this is going to be our year. So what do? I tune in and I watch the 4th quarter, and we always lose in the last quarter. And then I wonder, is it worth it? Should I tune in? Should I give my time? But every year I believe that this is going to be our year. And so your actions follow those beliefs. You show up and the same is true in our faith, is that when we believe and commit our hearts to Jesus, your actions follow that belief. And so it starts with belief, but then it results in a lifestyle, a way of acting around people. And that's what we see so beautifully illustrated in Matthew chapter 25 and throughout Jesus' entire life.
Absolutely. And I think one of the points that was brought up was that these are small acts of mercy.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be, overwhelming or all-consuming.
And this is really an epiphany that I had. You can do them every single day, acts of mercy and compassion. You can show up in somebody's life and write them an encouraging note. You can, be there for them. But here's where I would even take it a step further. Potentially some people are looking and going, well, I feel bad that I'm not doing more of fill in the blank. And I would just look at you and I would say, let's use the lens of our purpose, how God created us, how he wired us, how he gifted us, and use that. You are not Jesus. You can't say yes. Jesus didn't even say yes to every opportunity. He stayed in his lane and his purpose. He knew what he needed to do. And so I would look at you and I would say, don't feel like every person is your responsibility. But when you identify God's gifting and purpose for your life, wow, now through that lens, I'm waking up every day going, okay, Lord, help me use my gifts and see the opportunities to use my gifts to serve others. So if you're just like a very generous person and God's given you financial resources, look for opportunities to bless people in that way, and God's probably going to reveal that to you. If you're like me and you love to add value through words of encouragement and different things, look for those opportunities to add that. So it's just a point for everybody to go, we don't have to be everything to everyone, but through the lens of our purpose, we get to lean in and look for those opportunities in God's gifting in our lives. And if we all do that, the world will be such a better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And by doing what God has gifted us to do versus thinking we got to do it all,
yes,
we're going to be able to maintain and sustain it.
That's right.
The energy levels.
And you're going to love doing it.
Absolutely.
Like, I rarely get out of a situation where I've been able to serve somebody else in my gifting and my calling and my purpose, and I walk away from that. Even though I'm physically exhausted, I'm walking away going, that felt great. That did something in me. Now, if you ask me, craftsmanship is one of my lowest spiritual gifts. I can do it, but if you ask me to do it over and over and over again, wow, I'm probably going to be exhausted and maybe even get burnt out. So I'm going to let somebody with that gift lead the way, the same way that they may want me to step up on stage and give a message, because that's a way God has gifted me. So I just want people to think through that, is lean into your giftedness and utilize that to serve others every single day in small ways and big ways.
That's great. That's such a great reminder, and hopefully encouraging to our listeners on what they can do to live this out. So as we think about the weekend and the fact that you got to speak this weekend, I know that so much goes into preparing a message. Like, I can't even imagine. I can only imagine. But it as I've done speaking on my own, it's like, oh, and I wish I could have put this in, and something else hit the cutting floor, and so I would love if you have something that you would have wished you could have gotten to but didn't get to.
Yes,
to share
thank you so much for this opportunity, because you're absolutely right. I mean, think about Ben every single weekend. He's giving a message. He only has a certain amount of time. Yeah. And so things like the Living It Out podcast really take it to the next level. So here's what I would love. I wish I could have given more time to this weekend, and I would like our listeners to think through is, why does Jesus make a point to connect our beliefs and actions so much? And if you really read through the life of Jesus, why does serving others come up so much? And I wish I could have camped out there for an entire 20 minutes. Here's a little homework and reading that I think will be valuable. Take a look at Matthew chapter 25, those last verses 31 through 46, and reread it, and then go over to Luke chapter 10, the story of the Good Samaritan. And so I was doing this morning with my men's group, and we were diving in, and it's unbelievable, the parallels. If you remember, the Good Samaritan, essentially, after two people had passed by the person that was in need, the real question on the table was, who's my neighbor? Almost at the lawyer who and Jesus chooses to tell the story is pointing out, are there people that I don't have to show up and love? Like, let me justify this a little bit. We all love to justify our inactivity when it comes to serving others in the name of Jesus. And so that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to get that answer. And ultimately, Jesus paints this picture of a man that was a despised Samaritan. Like, Jews would have never interacted with them, and all this kind of racial tension that's going on. And yet this man was the one that stopped and chose to, see if this sounds familiar, to put clothes on his back, to invite him onto his donkey and have a shelter over his house, like over him, to feed him and pay for his bills. Like, this was the man that showed compassion and mercy. It's almost the exact same thing. And so why did Jesus paint a picture of how we are to act around people, it's because, and this is what I wish I would have been able to elaborate on, it's because loving God and loving people are one and the same in the eyes of Jesus. They are not exclusive. You can't take one without the other. We are called to love God with all of our hearts, and we are called to love our neighbor the same way. And so Jesus wanted to make a point, like, you don't get a pass. You can't choose one or the other. You've got to bring them together. Love God, this vertical relationship, loving others, this horizontal relationship, which just paints a picture of how Jesus lived his life. And I want our listeners to really tie those two together and know that they cannot be pulled apart when you want to follow Jesus.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to get to focus on the vertical.
I'm loving God, which is great.
It is great.
It is great. Some of you might be there right now, like you just got to know God more. But as you explore that, the more you read, you can't let it stop there.
Yes.
And that's honestly where it gets uncomfortable and sometimes even inconvenient in our lives when we're like, I'd rather just, study God's word and keep feeling that connection to him. But then when you start to apply it, you realize we live in a broken world, and it's difficult. And it's going to put you in conversations like this at a coffee shop with people who don't believe what you believe.
Right.
And you're going to seek to understand and learn and love them through that. And that's uncomfortable and inconvenient. It's way easier to hang out with people that think the same thing that you do and believe the same thing that you do. But God didn't design life that way. He wants to use you to love God and to love others. And so that's a powerful concept that I don't want our listeners to miss. And so really my next step would be is, where are the opportunities in your life to live out your love for God with the people around you? Is it at work? Is it at home, in your neighborhood? Where is God inviting you to invest in these horizontal relationships that are an overflow of your relationship with God?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. And I know it's one that's come up a few times in our past series of, like, who is your one?
Yes.
Who can you share Jesus with?
Yes.
And walk alongside them in that process. So that is great. And it is messy. I think that's the tricky part, is that it can get messy pretty quick, and it's like, this is uncomfortable.
And just to comment on that, your friends that don't know Jesus, that maybe God is calling you to, I recommend that you start from a place of listening and learning. Just to build, you can come in with the gospel, and the gospel is convicting. It is beautiful and convicting. But I also think starting from a place of relationship building and understanding of who they are, what brought them to this point, what was their experiences with past churches that maybe caused a rift or a divide or a misunderstanding. Man, really build that common understanding. That's one of the most loving things you can do. Yeah. And then through the gift of building that relationship, you can invite them into seeing it a different way, coming to church with you, hearing a different version of maybe what they were confused on as a child, or have never heard before.
Right.
So I would really recommend stepping into those conversations in that way.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's they've just heard something, they haven't actually experienced it. So they're making a decision based on something that they don't quite understand, but think they do. And so what a beautiful opportunity, not only to talk with them, but also to do life with them and to show them, to live out what that faith looks like, rather than just speak to them.
Boy, the church will grow enormously if we all do that to one person.
Yeah.
And so, who's your one?
Who's your one? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important that we and if you don't have a one, if you're like, I don't know, I don't have a one, then pray about it.
That's right.
And God will bring someone into your life. I mean, just as Chris has been talking about, that's his purpose for us, is to reach the world, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't have someone off the top of your head, then pray, and God, that will be a prayer that will ultimately be revealed to you.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. Yeah. Whether it's a complete stranger or, somebody out at your kid's sports field that, opens up. One of my goals in life is to make every conversation that I have go deeper than the surface level. I don't always succeed. But if I'm intentionally doing that, and preparing my heart for that, maybe with a good question or some things that help it go a little bit deeper, then I'm communicating to this person that I actually care about you.
Yes.
And just, practical application of this is if you do have one of those surface level conversations, or even you get a little bit deeper, the next time you meet that person, bring back what you talked about as if to communicate, I heard you.
Yeah.
And I care about that. And I'm thinking, oh, here's an easy one. Here's a real easy one. I rarely get rejected on this, even from my unchurched friends. How can I pray for you specifically? Like just an easy question after you've kind of had a relationship or a connection, or even text them that opens the door sometimes to more questions about the gospel and a realization that this is a person that cares enough about me that they're asking how they can care for me. And one of the ways we can do that is pray for each other. So I highly recommend that too.
That's great. And so simple. I mean, It really is.
Everyday acts of mercy that everybody can do.
Yes. I love that. I love that because I think we make it overcomplicated. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciated that piece of the message. When that was brought up, it was like, oh yeah, that is all the things you read about in Matthew 25 are like, really, a cup of water? Like,
yes,
it's, and what could that even be representing? But it's not as hard.
I think a book that really helped me was What to Do Next by Jeff Henderson. He's a former pastor. He's a business leader. But I love the way that he said it this way. All of us can start where we are, use what we have, and do what we can. Like, you could be waiting for, I just need this and then I will. Well, let's start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And that was kind of the practical application of everyday acts of mercy that everyone can do. Start where you are. Where does God place you?
Yeah.
Hey, if you're in Northwest Ohio, great. Where are you at? Use what you have and do what you can with it.
Great words. Great words.
There we go.
There we go. Well, I think we have a lot of practical next steps that we've talked about throughout. Any others that you want to touch on before we
Well, absolutely. I think one thing that was mentioned in the message was just creating margin for the interruptions.
Yes.
And so here's what I want to invite you to do is look at your calendar and ask yourself, where do you prioritize serving others? And if you don't have an answer for that, I'm going to give you an option. I would love for, or even answer to this question, is my calendar aligned with God's purpose for my life? That may reveal I really don't know God's purpose for my life. Well, we have a growth track experience that we talk about often, but the reason that we do is we believe in it. We believe that when you understand God's purpose, that's a great next step for you. Starting in November, you can be there. The second thing is that if you really don't have a space to serve others, but you know God's purpose, consider joining our dream team or stepping into an opportunity to go out in our city on Second Saturday to serve others. This is a 1 day, couple hour commitment once a month that you can really dip your toe in the water of. I want to prioritize serving others. So we have those projects at all of our campuses. Those are a couple next steps that are very practical.
That's
prioritize
great.
it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that Second Saturday serve is all the campuses. So wherever you attend, that is an option for you, and definitely Growth Track if you haven't stepped into that already, because it's a game changer to know how God has wired you and give you ideas of how you could step into that, what that could look like, so that you can live out that relationship upward and outward.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Chris, always, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kelly, you're awesome. And all of you, thanks for tuning in. The fact that you're engaging in this beyond the weekend, it shows your heart, and I hope it helps you today.
Absolutely. We hope that this reminds you that you matter and helps you to live that out as you go through the week. Thanks for being here, everyone.